So let me start off with the most common arguments you've heard against the WNBA.
WNBA games suck. The men are just better. The WNBA will never be what the men be.
Let's go ahead and tackle it just to see if your argument against the WNBA is valid or is warranted. Now let's take a look. The men's game started in 1946. Now, as you all probably know at this point, they're celebrating 75 years of the NBA. That's important, but for what reason? In the tech world, they say technology advances like every 14 or 16 months or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But the same thing can happen in sports. It just takes a little bit longer. So I'm just gonna use the theory that sport has a revolution every 10 years. So we already know that the men's game is 75 years in, meaning they have about 7.5 potential revolutions. It's important to recognize that you can't have a full revolution without having the adequate resources. So let's say the men's game has 100% of the resources. They had most, if not all of the resources, just because they started first. They started in 1946. So for their 7.5 potential revolutions in their game, they had 7.5 total resources. They had the amount of resources they needed to completely revolutionize their game. Meaning they've gone through 7.5 full revolutions in their 75 years. So as most of you already know, the WNBA started in 1996, so they're celebrating their 25th year anniversary this year. Meaning they've had 2.5 potential revolutions. Now remember, a revolution happens in sport once every 10 years. What's a revolution? A revolution is when the sport changes for the better. Now, another major difference apart from the times they both started are the amount of resources they receive. While the men's game gets 100% of the resources, if not all of the adequate resources they need to change their game, let's say the women receive about 50%. Now, I wanted to be nice and put this at 75, but when I was thinking about it, I realized that the women might not even get 50% of the resources. So I think 50% is just more accurate. So that means we have 2.5 potential revolutions and only 1.5 of the total resources. Meaning in the 25 years the WNBA has been in existence, it's only gone through one full revolution. So which game is better? The men's or the women's? Obviously it's the men's. Now, does that mean that the women's game sucks or that men are just inherently better at basketball? If you want to, make that claim off the back of evolution, okay, maybe you can now because we're so far advanced into the men's game. These NBA players will have, kids that will take on their genetic code. If you want to make evolution your claim, go ahead and do it. But that doesn't mean that the WNBA sucks or that women are bad at basketball or they can't play basketball. They just have had less time to develop and they've only been developing with half of the resources. At this point, slandering and hating on the WNBA is like yelling at the JV kid at varsity practice when that kid has had no food to eat the entire day. Like, you're not helping. If anything, help the kid out, right? Like, coach him up, get him a Gatorade protein bar or something. Again, this is another reason why I just don't understand why the WNBA gets hate.